The Pokemon world is more polluted than you imagine. Weezing releasing toxic fumes into the air. Muck living in mountains of filth created by humans. Swalot residing in poisonous pits filled with crystallized bane. Let alone places such as the Burned Mansion, a living cesspool of a breeding ground that supports many lives of Pokemon in its own special way. Creating entire ecosystems that we would normally see as filth, but other Pokemon such as Gastly would see as a fitting home and a delicacy. Donning my hazmat suit and carrying plenty of antidotes, I travel through these cursed lands, discovering the hidden beauty of these dangerous Pokemon and their environments. Also, I can bring to you the toxic ecology of Pokemon's polluted world. Howdy there, I'm Kurlik, and we're purple today, just to match a little bit of toxicness that would be here. And to better explain what you have heard, there are many locations in which humanity has created destruction or filth in the world of Pokemon, and as a result, there are Pokemon born from that. Not only will I be talking about these poisonous critters, but also the ones that manage to live alongside them. Some of these areas may not be entirely toxic to the world necessarily, but at least toxic to us, while others will be like the Burned Mansion, which is a breeding ground for toxicity and biohazardous material. Maybe even some areas that just have a little bit of extra trash, and as such have attracted creatures that eat said trash in order to make sure the world stays clean. I'll be treating this similarly to my traditional regional ecology series for the most part, in addition to using some of these Pokemon to track down other polluted areas. And there are plenty that do exist. So how about we get started with the first one that should come to mind, the Burned Mansion, otherwise known as Pokemon Mansion in its official terms. So Burned Mansion actually has a lot of different stories going on, but the number one bit of information that everything connects back to for all of its stories is that Mewtwo was born here. And this is important as it helps us understand how our environments came to support the Pokemon within it. Diary, July 5th. We discovered a new Pokemon deep in the jungle. Diary, July 10th. We christened the newly discovered Pokemon Mew. February 6th. We obtained a new Pokemon from Mew. We have named this new Pokemon Mewtwo. And on September 1st, Mewtwo is far too powerful. We have failed to curb its vicious tendencies. The journal entries that would lead up to not only just the creation, but the escape of the legendary Pokemon Mewtwo, leaving nothing but destruction and fire in its wake. Whether it's Blaine in the manga or Fuji within the anime and games, we know that this place is legendary for what happened here. The creation of a new life form that broke free from its oppressive shackles and just completely escaped. Though its escape in such a fiery and destructive fashion was not one that simply burned everything down to the ground, because the majority of the research was completed in the basement, the same place where we find the 5 test chambers. The 5 chambers that would include Mewtwo, Ambertwo, Bulbasaur, Squirtle, and Charmander too, all of them being clones of their real versions. Though Mewtwo was the only one that was actually successful, until, later on in the movie, and we get all the other ones that are clones that are created, and that just becomes a whole other mess. It's here in the basement where all of this started, the fires that would rise and burn said basement, but due to the stone flooring and overall composition of the mansion, these flames would stay contained and would only burn the works of the scientists who created Mewtwo, and a couple of them while we're at it. The journals are more faded by time than they are burned when we look at them, their pages looking more like they amassed coffee stains. And as the mansion was abandoned and left to disrepair, the town began to build more and more around it. I've always suspected Blaine to know of the mansion's secrets, especially as in other canons he is aware, and in the manga he is the lead scientist on Team Rocket's projects, even sacrificing some of his own cells in order to actually finish creating Mewtwo, bonding them together for all the rest of their lives. Now, he sits outside the mansion to protect it from others and to protect others from it. The reason I say this is because you can't just demolish any building once it has been deemed abandoned. Depending upon the structure and the time that it was built, the materials within it may also be a hazard to life as a whole, as there's things such as asbestos within the walls, potentially. Even if we don't consider that, then we have to consider the many years that toxic chemicals were released inside of the building, how those were burned up and has left ash all throughout the carpets and the walls. That there might be Rattata droppings throughout the area, and if we were to demolish it, we would set about releasing a plague upon the people of Cinnabar. Luckily, it would only be the people of Cinnabar unless, a certain couple of rats got onto a boat and the bubonic plague was a thing somehow. But the only way to get rid of it is to have it all burned down, which it eventually did a couple years later when a volcanic eruption did occur. But before that, this mansion somehow became a thriving ecosystem for those that resided in it. And to help me understand what that ecosystem is like in the modern day, before that eruption, we'll be using encounter rates from the Let's Go games primarily, with support from past editions. In the Let's Go games, we don't find Vulpix or Growlithe within the mansion anymore, and to me, this makes perfect sense. While those two Pokemon are fire types, they are still not adept to surviving in toxic conditions. Sure, maybe they'd run in chasing after another Pokemon, or maybe wander in for a place of shelter, or maybe some lucky charcoal in the case of Vulpix, but it is otherwise a place that would only hurt those two. As such, it makes sense that they aren't found there anymore. And the Let's Go games do take place a little bit after the original games, so we have a time span difference. Maybe they were going in there and then they eventually learned that it was bad for their health, so as the species had new generations, didn't teach their young to go in there for very good reasons. But now we can really get into the meat and potatoes, as the first and most common Pokemon you will find here starts with Koffing and Grimer, taking up a total of 80% of the encounters, at least on the floors above the basement. Koffing creates gases within its body by mixing toxins with garbage and produces more gas in higher temperatures. These gases are malodorous, basically they smell bad, and cause sniffles, coughs, and teary eyes to those around them. The gases are also lighter than air, allowing Koffing to hover. When agitated, it creates a more toxic gas and expels it through the holes in its body. As shown in the Pokemon The Series episode Pokemon Emergency, its gas can be ignited by fire or electricity. It feeds on the fumes of raw, rotting trash found in gas dumps and polluted air. It, at one point, was plentiful in Galar due to factories and is often found in urban areas. There's a number of different gases that it could be producing. Could be methane, propane, butane, hydrogen, and so many more that I'm not going to name off here. It could even be making a a gaseous mixture of all of these, and including additional poisonous gases that are a lot more poisonous to us, such as carbon monoxide, breaking things apart, putting them together as it so pleases. I also feel like I'm put on a new watch list every single week because, just as any other writer, I am looking up things such as what natural gases are explosive. This whole video, this is my alibi. I swear I am doing all of this in the name of science, which doesn't sound any better the more I try to scream that is what I'm doing. Oops. But back to Koffing, we know that there are likely fumes within the building that have been trapped for years. It could be basic toxins, as I talked about already. It could be new fumes that are being created. For example, some of those odors may be coming from a certain couple of other Pokemon that might be living cesspools, or maybe defecating within the building and nobody is there to clean it up. Now, the actions of Koffing in turn will create more gases, which made me realize that Koffing is no better than any other invasive species, especially certain plant species such as the spotted knapweed within America, or rather North America at the very least. Now that plant will survive in incredibly harsh conditions while also still releasing natural herbicides that will kill any other similar plants or otherwise around it, creating a monoculture, basically an area where only these spotted knapweed will survive. And it seems as though Koffing has the capacity to do the same exact thing, not only causing damage to other Pokemon, but also the economy and people as a whole, which would label it as an invasive species. I did do an invasive species video, but I did not include it there because, I wasn't really thinking about it at the time for Koffing. Unfortunately for Koffing, there are a slew of other Pokemon that love to roll around in the filth, but we'll get to them later. Instead, let's talk about its evolution, Weezing, so that way we can continue to understand the picture that is being painted here. each of Weezing's heads contain a different toxin. It mixes its gases by inflating one head and deflating the other. When these gases mix, Weezing becomes more toxic and putrid. I realize with it inflating and deflating, it's taking advantage of pressures within the gas laws. Woo! Don't send me back to college, please. So what this has officially done, though, is taken all the toxins and the gases that already exist, and they've created new forms, new combinations, and you might just be saying to yourself, well, it's just taking what's already toxic and making it worse, right? It's not that bad if I accept that it's all already deadly, and that's where you are wrong. You can't just accept that something is deadly and can't get worse. Take carbon dioxide, mix it with other gases in the right way, and you will result in carbon monoxide as you remove one of the oxygen molecules from it. You gotta give it something enticing. Weezing could be creating ozone accidentally, as while that is super important for our atmosphere, it's super deadly for carbon life. For all we know, it could be creating mustard gas even, which will typically be so heavy it stays on the ground, but with enough of it, you are in trouble. So again, removing oxygen, or removing molecules, or atoms rather, and combining it with other pieces creates a huge number of issues, and we don't know what the limit of this Pokemon is, as it's creating a massive array of different gases. There's a lot that this Pokemon could be creating, all of it dangerous, all of it ensuring only the hardiest of creatures survive. But I will at least admit that in regards to the mustard gas, that may not be happening at least, or any other heavy gases, as otherwise we wouldn't be able to explain the fact that this Pokemon floats up in the air. Those gases being heavier than normal air, resulting in it being at the bottom. So probably doesn't have mustard gas in their body, and other Pokemon we do find here likely would not be able to survive horrible gases like that. What's also interesting is that despite their stench and poison, Weezing's gases can be used to make top-grade perfume by diluting them to their highest level. And after a bit of digging, yeah, it turns out that there are plenty of fragrances that are highly toxic and can cause allergic reactions, depending on the, bits that they use to make their perfume. The trick is, as always, is that they're used in incredibly small amounts, in sprays or mists that otherwise have little to no effect if used correctly. Now, take all of that with a grain of salt, as it all depends on the perfume or cologne, but there are a number of chemicals in them that even just help the smell last longer that may be listed as a toxin or priority pollutant by the National Institute of Health, such as diethyl phthalate. Phthalate. There are certain words even I cannot say. Many words that I cannot say. Oops. Now I'm second guessing using that nice little cologne that my fiance got me a couple of months ago. But Weezing lives in urban areas. It seeks a dirty, unkempt house and nests there. At night, when the people in the house are asleep, it will go through the trash, feeding on the dust, microorganisms, and especially gases emitted by garbage and toxic waste. We can easily assume that that is exactly what it's doing within the burned or Pokemon mansion, whatever you want to call it. Any bacteria that thrives, any dust or soot in the case of the mansion here, and their primary thing that they consume being the gases, which if it is garbage, then it's most likely methane. To help solidify that, as told by the United States Environmental Protection Agency, landfill gas, LFG, is a natural byproduct of the decomposition of organic material in landfills. LFG is composed of roughly 50% methane, the primary component of natural gas, 50% carbon dioxide, and a small amount of non-methane organic compounds. Both of those make perfect sense for me and for our burned mansion here. You just gotta throw in a couple of other extra chemicals for whatever they use to make the fluid that Mewtwo and everybody kind of floats in, or whatever they had to use for their biochemical processes. Weezing's body expands and smells worse upon inhaling poisonous gases, and the Cantonian Weezing used to be common in Galar and created more potent toxins than their Galarian relatives. This is likely due to the climate shift, the incredibly harsh one, that did occur in the region, and we'll talk about Galar in its own rights later. Don't worry, I'm not even going to go through their route by route areas. It's Galar as a whole. Now, all of this info makes it a lot easier to understand how it fits in without having to break it down further. But how about we talk about the mortifying ooze that is Grimer next? Grimer is a slimy, amorphous Pokemon born from sludge in dirty streams or seabeds that are exposed to lunar radiation. And I've talked about it 100 times, but moonlight is its own thing in the Pokemon world, though some of you have suggested, similar to our moon in the real world, moonlight is of course reflected sunlight, but then the Pokemon world's moon transforms that sunlight, unlike our sun or moon does. That came out awkward, but this is likely because of items such as the Moonstone, which causes the evolution of a number of different Pokemon. So this moonlight has an immense number of mystical properties, and I hope we do get to properly explore planets one day within something like, I don't know, a Legends Alola game. Make me be part of the, recon squad. That'd be amazing. Now, Grimer's purpley, sludgy body contains a variant of pungent bacteria, which are so potent that it renders soil barren and incapable of supporting plant life. It is constantly oozing a bacteria-rich fluid from all parts of its body. Now, what's complicated about this is that there are a number of different chemicals or biohazards in general that can cause this, let alone the combinations of them. For plants specifically, there's tons of different diseases, like Dutch elm disease to Granville wilt in things like potatoes or peppers, fire blights in apples and pears, so on and so forth. So there's not really much of a way to narrow it down. Let's just say this is super aggressive bacteria that lives in massive colonies, which is basically what this Pokemon is. Because should Grimer run out of germs, it flat out dies, or at least runs out of internal germs, it flat out dies. Pieces of it often do break off during travel and go on to become new Grimer. And when it does combine with other Grimer, it produces new poisonous compounds. What this tells us is that Grimer's consumption of materials or life is because it needs to fuel the bacteria that's in its body, which in turn fuels Grimer to continue living. This is distinctly different from creatures like the volcano snail that doesn't eat, but the bacteria inside of its body keep it alive, or ourselves, as enzymes break down all the different pieces for our body to use, while bacteria create cultures within our body. These bacteria are our natural flora that not only get their own benefits from sitting inside of us, but might also help with certain processes in our body and protect us from foreign bacteria. Though, given the opportunity, they will still attack us because the ultimate goal of life is simply to procreate and then die. That should go on a shirt, procreate and die. That's that. Put it down the list of shirts. Go check out the Teespring, check out Worm Pulp. Now, due to its lack of solid form, Grimer is capable of squeezing into any space or crevices with relative ease. It uses this to penetrate sewage pipes and feed off of the filthy wastewater inside. Its population fluctuates based on the availability of waste, which is Grimer's main diet. It can be found in polluted lakes and streams, as well as within cities and factories where trash and industrial waste can be found. In recent years, thanks to efforts in environmental improvements and a decrease in their food source of waste, Grimer is now facing extinction. It's also very directly stated that they can't live in sterile environments as the bacteria is then unable to multiply, which will result in the death of the Grimer. And of course, general wastewater has improved, meaning that doesn't serve as a food source anymore. So I decided to look something up that I did not script here, and that was the black sludge item. Now, black sludge in real life is like a byproduct that is separated from water when it goes to a wastewater facility, and it's really cool to look at because it just has all the nasty, grimy stuff, not any of the medicine or anything that some people wrongfully flush down the drain, but it has a bunch of other stuff that needs to get separated. And that black sludge can be used for, let's say, farming, or you can burn it up as another source of fuel. So you're getting fuel while also cleaning something or otherwise, and it's really, really cool. Now, I decided that I needed to look up how you get it, and it seems that you can get it from Krogunk and Toxicroak. You can get it from Trubbish or Garbodor, Garbodor having a 50% chance, which makes perfect sense considering what I just said, as you remove the particulate matter and everything else from wastewater, for example. And then it turns out Grimer is the other Pokemon that can be seen holding it. Very interesting that Muck is not seen holding it whatsoever, and that might be because this black sludge that the Grimer let off is actually, well, future Grimer that need to get hit by moonlight or just haven't fully awakened just yet. So maybe leave some black sludge out, and it might become a new Pokemon at some point, which is actually a little bit scary. And to better explain clean wastewater, you have gray water, black water, and then your clean wastewater. Gray water refers to domestic wastewater generated in households or office buildings from streams without fecal contamination. Basically all streams except for the wastewater from toilets. Source of gray water includes sinks, showers, baths, washing machines, or dishwashers. Basically, if it has toxic chemicals or excrements in it, it's black water. If not, then it's gray water. But then if it's treated water, it becomes clean water. Clean water also includes springs, wells, city water, and rainwater, assuming once again, it has no harsh chemicals or excrements within it. Please, please, please do not just go drinking water off the city streets, as that is not what city water is meant to mean, and just because a river is a moving source of water does not mean that it is clean and that there is no Ecology in it. I've studied enough water science firsthand that I've had to explain this to my fiance, and it freaks me out just a little bit how clean water can look, and then it could be just thriving with Ecology to the point where if you drink it, you're going to the hospital. And it's moments like this why I miss studying environmental engineering in college. That was my other passion. But anywho, cool! Grimer is eating excrement and chemical water. That makes perfect sense, especially as wastewater facilities will now do a better job of removing these damaging things from the water before returning it back to nature. The problem still stands, though, that a Grimer might make its way into a sewer system and thrive in excessive numbers, which I'm sure has the chance to become a problem that needs cleaning out from time to time if not checked on. Now, all of this only becomes worse as it would evolve into muck, who is described directly as a living biohazard, leaking toxins that instantly kill all plant life it touches. Even it being in close proximity to plants will cause them to wilt and die. There is not a single thing on our planet that I'm personally aware of that immediately kills plants like this, unless it's an extreme acid or an extreme base. And even then, to instantly kill something means that it is more than just basic bacteria or chemicals. Muck has reached the extremes of life-threatening capabilities. Extreme caution is advised in avoiding any contact with this Pokemon, as an accidental brush-up can lead to severe sickness. The effects of this Pokemon can leave the landscape barren for 3 years. It will also readily consume nearly any waste or refuse generated by people and Pokemon alike. Yet another confirmation that Pokemon poop for all the non-believers out there that say Pokemon poop through their moves. Woo. Muck's body produces a powerful odor that can cause fainting. However, despite the risk Muck's stench contains, some fans of Muck believe its stench is a good thing, which that could make sense if we contextualize it. Think of it this way. Usually when something is decaying, it means that odors are going to be released, as we spoke of with Koffing or Weezing. These are going to be the same, if not similar, components, which means that whatever Grimer and Muck are doing, however it is that their bacteria is living and consuming whatever it is that they eat, the wastewater, is actually working. And that is a good thing as it rids those from our environments. The problem is that it itself still leaks this stuff from its body. Pokemon like this are the answer to humanity's pollution problem, and I'll talk about that just a little more after we finish up Muck here. Just remember that bit of info, and that Muck letting off fumes means that Koffing could be born from them, or they at least absorb these fumes on occasion. This also means that our poison Pokemon are supporting each other's life, that they are truly connected within this mansion or any other areas we might find them. Muck can be found in heavily polluted bodies of water, factories, and cities where groups can gather to consume trash that people throw away in the streets. However, Muck's population has declined due to recent environmental improvements and extermination efforts. This has led some people to believe that it will go extinct at some point, and as such, sludge ponds are being built to prevent its extinction. Muck are living creatures in the end, and they, amongst other poison-type Pokemon, are produced by us. This is at least confirmed through the Pokemon Adventures manga, because throughout the first 2 major arcs spanning 7 chapters within the manga, we are informed about humanity polluting the world, how Pallet Town is the last clean slate of the Kanto region, hence the name Pallet. like an artist's palette before all the other colors are added to it and they remove what its natural form was. Throughout this second major arc, being Amarillo's, as I call her, or the yellow arc, we are shown a little bit closer just how horrid humanity is, building entire factories that destroyed the land, their toxins hurting all the Pokemon who live there, displacing them, removing their food sources, or just flat out killing them entirely. This is the driving motivation for the Elite Four in the manga to turn their backs on humanity and prepare to commit mass genocide, literal mass genocide, where only ace trainers who are truly dedicated to the Pokemon world and Pokemon themselves, the safety and the well-being of them, would thrive alongside said Pokemon. And Agatha herself says that Pokemon such as Gastly were created from the toxic gases in the air, producing its body and allowing it to take refuge in harsh environments and even consume the toxins plaguing other Pokemon, saving them from an untimely demise that we caused. And to kind of bounce off of this as a small tangent, Pokemon has always been about humans being a part of nature, being one with Pokemon and the world itself, which is very Aldo Leopold. And even when it is not about nature directly, it's about closing the divide that humanity has created between each other and Pokemon. Even now, I suspect the story of the rich versus the poor will be unraveled within Legends ZA, as we have a guy that wants to get rid of free transportation system. We have anti-homeless benches, while also having Emma, a character who was introduced to be homeless and illiterate, and then was brought or given a chance by Looker, as she earned her place as well within the X and Y games. You can even watch the Pokemon Generations episode to really understand what's going on there, because it tells you everything. Or check out my analysis of the trailers we have so far and my prediction for the entire plot. But Pokemon, nevertheless, has a message for us in every single game, and more often than not, it's about being one with the world, being kind, and being here for one another. It's just disguised as a children's game or show most of the time. But before we continue, I just want to say thank you so much for watching. Writing even just this bit so far was so much fun, and I'm having a blast actually talking about it in this video, and I would love to continue doing so with all of these intricate details. If you are enjoying this, please ensure that you do subscribe. Even leave a comment below about your favorite poison type Pokemon, or even fun fact about nature. My favorite Pokemon and favorite poison type is the boy right behind me, the Gengar. That's why there's a shrine there, baby. I do love reading comments when I do have time, and both comments and watch time help boosts a video's reach as told by YouTube itself. And if you'd like to go the extra mile, you can always become a member of the channel on here or Patreon for as little as $3 a month. It helps immensely, and you get some perks such as your name shouted out at the end credits of every single video. But again, thank you so much for watching, and on with the video. We have a couple more Pokemon within this mansion that I do want to speak about, such as Rattata and Raticate. And Rattata can live wherever it can find food, which it searches for most of the day. Thanks to its sharp fangs, it is able to chew on nearly anything. When it is threatened, it can deliver a powerful bite, and they constantly keep their ears up and will immediately scurry away from the slightest sound. Its hardiness allows it to live in many environments, although it mainly lives on plains and savannas. Because it reproduces so quickly, a pair of Rattata can quickly colonize an area. Perfect! That easily helps explain why we find them here, and it's all because they could just survive here without an issue, and those that don't survive are quickly replaced anyway, which is very dark sounding, but that's reality. That's also how real life works with some animals, and if they can't find food inside of the building, all they have to do is go outside and forage for food, maybe even hunt down some small fish, some minnows, whatever. Then, by taking refuge within the mansion, they leave droppings all over the place, assuming they defecate as much as any other mouse or rat might. This results in Grimer having physical matter to consume, while the stench is potentially consumed by our Koffing line. And if those Rattata ever pass away, well, that's also food for our little pocket monsters here. Something has to eat up the decay. Even as it evolves further into Raticate, it's not all that different. I'd say the key bit of info is that it will need to gnaw at something in order to quell its growing teeth. Those teeth being able to gnaw through steel. So the damage of the building that we see may be more than just the rubble left behind in Mewtwo's wake. It may also be property damage caused by Raticate's teething. I don't know why me saying property damage immediately made me think that, like, Raticate was gonna get taken to court, just served some papers for damaging the mansion itself. Though this all does make sense outside of the suing Raticate for property damage, because Raticate is directly noted to possibly chew on the walls of houses, cinder blocks, and eventually cause the toppling of concrete buildings. To me, this just says that the mansion was doomed to fall at some point. With enough territorial disputes or general damage caused by the Pokemon living within, it would have collapsed at some point and spread its filth to the surrounding area. But there are still 3 more Pokemon to talk about here, starting with the other Pokemon on my thumbnail that was so much fun to draw based on the TCG cards, Magmar. And I said TCG weird. Now, you'd think it'd be strange to find Magmar here, considering that it is normally found in volcanoes where it can dip its body in to restore its health and get rid of fatigue. But that's just it. There is a volcano here, as we have discussed, though I'll admit, I never really imagined it there, mainly because in Generation 1 and 2, it's not visible, which is kept that way until Generation 4, or if you look at the concept art, which depicts the volcano in the Let's Go games. And it's super close to, like, the entire settlement. It's like asking to die, and whether it's there or not, it makes it really feel like some Bernstein's Bears conspiracy type stuff right there. Got that good Mandela effect going on. But so knowing that the volcano is there and very close to everything, it does make sense that we would now find Magmar wandering around the area and making their way into the mansion itself. It likes warm environments, so it'll scorch up the area to keep it that way, and it does hunt for prey, which, based on my past ecology studying in my other videos, the Magmar line is more than likely hunting after Pokemon such as Rattata amongst any other creatures not made of minerals in the environments in which it lives. This is all well supported that Magmar is just wandering here, as it has only a 14% chance of appearing and less so within the basement. It might also fight other Pokemon here for fun or because it's being a little bit territorial and aggressive. Meanwhile, the last commonly found Pokemon appearing here has only a 1% chance on the main floors and a 10% chance of appearing in the basement. The Pokemon that made the world swear that it was a failed Mew clone, Ditto itself. Now, admittedly, Ditto is very incredibly strange. It doesn't care for conflict, as it won't even fight its own kind, despite being very aggressive with other Ditto. Instead, they compete to see who can transform best. They will infiltrate groups of Pokemon such as Execute or Humanity within the Alolan games, and they have no reason to eat anything at all since they can just copy the exact molecular structure of any other Pokemon. This means that they could turn into Grimer and eat refuse for energy. They could become Koffing and absorb the chemicals. They could become a plant Pokemon and absorb sunlight. The possibilities are endless, and it makes Ditto a creature that can fit in anywhere it decides. So why is it here? There's little to no conflict, that's why. Grimer and Koffing duos aren't really competing or fighting amongst themselves. Rattata and Raticate might be territorial, but just stay away from them and you're okay for the most part. And Magmar is just gonna fight anyone and everyone anyway, but there's plenty of other Pokemon to use as meat shields. Humans aren't even really walking in here anymore, meaning that Ditto has nearly nothing to worry about in a place such as this. It can stay secluded, and it can live its little goopy life as it wishes, fairly stress-free. Makes perfect sense for a Pokemon that likes to avoid conflict, and I love Ditto, but I will always claim it to be the anomaly that it is. A creature that exists in many forms and yet is not really part of the ecosystem whatsoever. It would be the ultimate invasive species if it actually decided to cause any harm, but it doesn't and just exists freely without even taking resources from other Pokemon other than space, which it doesn't do for long. The last Pokemon that we run into is one that is on all floors, and it is a rare spawn here and a couple of other areas, so I won't really mention it again, being Chansey. And the only reason this makes sense is because Chansey is our nurse Pokemon, the one to take care of Pokemon and people who might be dumb enough to walk into such a biohazardous area such as this. Chansey is basically just telling kids not to touch the sludge so they don't contract every disease known to man. But that actually makes me think, what if Muck had an evolution and it was just called Sludgeon? It will never get an evolution, I think, but that's just food for thought. Grimer, Muck, Sludgeon. Just like how I would love to see Weezing with 3 heads, as the Pokedex alludes to. Poison Fire, there you go. That's the typing to make it. Anywho, Chansey isn't really living here, it's just making its daily rounds to make sure nobody dies within the mansion, and creates a new surplus of dirty denizens to dwell within this dungeon. And to save us some time, the burned tower is very much the same in regards to like their comparisons when we talk about how the ecology works. The only difference though is that the area is not inherently toxic, as we don't find Grimer there at all. This is likely because there's not only a massive hole in the roof or multiple floors of the building to let clean air through, but also because this is a historical site that seems to be at least marginally maintained by the public, even though there are plenty of people battling inside and probably causing property damage. Oops. The Kanto power plant. Similarly enough, the power plant that contains Zapdos is also not that big of a deal, considering the Grimer and Muck population there is incredibly low, being the major source of said pollution within the Pokemon Adventures manga, since it was partially built and then abandoned. Here we find a slew of Pokemon that aren't quite worth getting into every detail about, but are still showing how Pokemon are affected. Grimer and Koffing lines are back, and while they make up about half the population if combined together from their separate games, otherwise our main contenders are Magnemite, Magneton, Voltorb, Electrode, and Electabuzz. All of these Pokemon are feeding and fueling their bodies through the use of electricity, competing with each other for that good spicy photon from all the generators or devices that were left behind, and if there are batteries, which we assume there are, they're likely leaking into the environment. Though it is important to specifically note that Magnemite typically will not fight unless cornered, while Magneton's magnetic fields serve as a pretty strong threat. The magnetic forces that hold the 3 Magnemite together are powerful enough to dry up all moisture and raise the temperature by 3.6 degrees Fahrenheit, 2 degrees Celsius, within a radius of 3,300 feet or 1 kilometer. It can also be disruptive to electronic devices and induce earaches. It uses powerful radio waves to help it study the surrounding area. That increase in heat does not sound like a lot, but that is actually massive, especially as that is just the radius. This means that the full diameter is over a mile, sitting at about 2 kilometers. All the air in the area having the moisture dried up and having that big of a temperature increase. We put this thing into a room and leave it there, and can you imagine how hot that room would get without any of that heat dissipating? I almost guarantee a person would die in there. I'm not gonna do that math. I left thermochemistry back in college because it was too much of a chore, and that was one of the few things I just did not care about. But if any of you know, tell me, because that sounds dope if I don't have to do the work for that in the comments. Meanwhile, with Voltorb and Electrode, they might explode at the slightest touch or explode as part of being territorial, but that's really the only bit of interaction that they have. Something similar can be said about Electabuzz, considering it just wants to consume as much electricity as possible. It is attracted to thunderstorms, and we have Zapdos residing in this location after all, so it makes perfect sense that a bit of micro-ecosystem is being found here. I will note though, within the manga, that a lot of these creatures kind of appeared there or were thriving in there even after Zapdos was gone. So it really has transformed into its own ecosystem and needs a lot of tending to get rid of it, and I don't know if humanity is ever going to do that within Kanto. When we track Grimer to other locations, we find them on routes 16 to 18, which is Kanto's cycling road that also connects to Celadon City. You know, the great big city with the great big department store. Something we'll notice is that the cycling roads across the regions do have a decent amount of pollution around them, oddly enough. This is likely because of a slew of different reasons that we have to study on case by case. The biggest of which, though, is that these are meant to represent pollution created by cars. In the games, this is more specifically shown through biker trainers, but I feel it would be fair to assume that there's likely some level of littering happening on these routes as well. No part of the cycling road seems to be worse than any other portion from what I could see, but it really is kind of funny to see that the population of Grimer and Muck increase dramatically at night. And when I say dramatically, I mean it. They go from taking up 0% of the encounter rates to jumping to a combined total of 100% of the encounters depending on the game. What I imagine is happening here is that after all the garbage has been dropped, all the general pollution occurs, and most people are off the road and back at home in other places, these sludgy monsters come out and take their fill. Otherwise, the moonlight strikes our sludge, and those moonlight x-rays, as it states, brings them to life. But you can also celebrate because eventually in the future, as shown through the Let's Go games, there are no more Grimer and Muck. Though that might also be because there's not a day-night cycle, hard to know for sure. I will also note that if you surf within Celadon within Generation 2, the only Pokemon you can find are Grimer and Muck within the water. This is of course that water waste that we've talked about. Even in Generation 3 or Fire Red and Leaf Green, you can find Koffing while surfing or Grimer while fishing. Again, simple city pollution in action being shown here as the general industrial smog is let out and waste is emptied into that little pool of water, or at least that pool of water is simply collecting general waste as it is not being attended to and cleaned up properly. I mean, people could literally just be walking past it and they might be carrying something on their shoes, and because it is like a pond that doesn't lead to anywhere or have a stream that takes the water away, it's stagnant and builds up just filth and grime and whatever else naturally. I would lean towards the latter of those explanations, since we do find other Pokemon surviving in the water within other generations that you are able to go into the water. It seems to change quite a bit, with Generation 3 having the lowest population by percent of Koffing and Grimer at 1% each. I would love to say that this alludes to the cleanup efforts, but it's back to having nothing but Grimer and Muck as surfing encounters within the Heart Gold Soul Silver games, so that's just a rough pollution spot all in all to really describe. Castelia Sewers is the perfect example of exactly what I was afraid of and mentioned earlier with Grimer and Muck. And that is the fact that while you're walking around the sewer, you will encounter primarily Rattata and Zubat, maybe a few Grimer with a 10% encounter. But if you jump into the water for some ungodly reason, you will be swarmed by nothing but Grimer and Muck as they bathe, drink, and create more pollution within all of this sewer water. But why Castelia? Well, once we look at the city, it becomes incredibly obvious. It is a massive, sprawling metropolis that is the center of business and economy within the Unova region. And don't feel bad, I had to ask that question myself, like, why Castelia, not Castelia, not. So now I'm imagining Castelia as a piece of pizza because I said Castelia instead of Castelia. Why are all these words so close together? Either way, even in the games, you can see these sheer masses of people moving around the city on the main streets, from tourists to businessmen and more. It's no wonder there's so much waste. And while the streets are seemingly clean, it's the sewers that clearly take the brunt of the damage from all the people coming here. And to save us some time, the only other human settlements we really find Grimer are within the towns in Paldea found in West and East Area 2, and apparently around Cortondo. These are small populations, so it's nothing to write home about. When we follow Koffing, we get more than just polluted areas. We get areas where it might be harder to breathe due to smoke from something like a volcano, for example. Ignoring the 7 that are only found in Team Rocket HQ as a trap, we instead find ourselves within places such as the Fiery Path or Stark Mountain. Fiery Path travels underground through Mount Chimney, containing Pokemon such as Machop, some Grimer, Slugma, Numel, and Torkoal. Grimer is likely only there because of the little bit of trash left behind by people on the transit leading up the mountain, or the trolley, whatever the heck it's called, on the wire. But due to the sheer amount of heat, the bacteria is unable to survive well, essentially sterilizing the environment through that extreme heat. Meanwhile, through all the smoke created by the volcano, in addition to Numel and Torkoal through their general habits, it makes sense that we find Koffing here. It might even be consuming some of that good sulfur odor thanks to Torkoal's diet of purely coal, making it so that the Koffing here are especially explosive, because when you burn off coal or charcoal, you can result in sulfur. I think it's like up to 5% these days, which is, better than it used to be, I think. Stark Mountain just takes all of this and brings it to the next level as we get Weezing thanks to the volcano there being very active thanks to Heatran. That in turn actually allows other Pokemon such as Magcargo to come into existence, and even Camerupt can continue to thrive here. Now, something I didn't write in my script that I just remembered is that around these areas, when we look at these mountains and the active volcanoes, there's this very sickly green-haired kid, Wally, that does originally live within these areas. And when we try to analyze him a little bit further, lots of people would say that, oh, he's sick, he's dying, he's got 100 different diseases, when in fact, it was just his breathing that is wrong with him. And as he's away from these environments, these hometowns or these places that he used to live in, away from the ash and soot and from the air, the bad air quality, the air pollution that's just kind of natural, he gets better. And eventually we see him around those spider lilies, those lilies that are meant to represent a change in life. In some cases they represent death, but in this case, again, they represent a new change, a new chapter in life for Wally as he has gotten better and probably just had some form of asthma originally and no longer has to deal with that anymore. And of course, within Unova, the Verbank complex, which is literally the Tachiwaki Industrial Complex, is where we will find Koffing. A male scientist describes the function of many aspects of the complex. A distillation tower or topper separates crude oil into different components, the smokestacks burn up waste gas, and the gas holders are a symbol of harmony, being spherical in shape in order to optimize the pressure of the gas within them, which all this is fantastic. They're trying to actually ensure that their waste byproducts are being handled to some capacity based on what knowledge they had at the time. Though, of course, scrubbers within smokestacks aren't always perfect, this would lead to there being some level of pollution still. This is reflected by Koffing being the only pollution-based Pokemon here, but it is also only having a 15% chance of appearing. Once again, even though it appears in Galar, I am saving the mess that is Galar for last. There are pollution Pokemon, or at least pollution-affected Pokemon, everywhere. Gulpin and Swalot are another great Pokemon for us to track as they tend to fill in similar ecological niches as Grimer and Muck. The big difference is that they don't really emit a super dangerous ooze, and Swalot will straight up eat Koffing. I'm not joking in the slightest. It's a bit haunting to watch it happen within Pokemon Snap. Gulpin swallows anything of its own size whole, since its stomach comprises most of its body. Its heart and brain are very small in comparison to its stomach. The unique stomach acid it has also allows it to digest almost anything, and when it is digesting, vile, overpowering gases are expelled. It lives in grasslands and savannas, and as mentioned in the sleep style decks, it is known to move its mouth while sleeping. When its mouth is closed, that means it is digesting food. If its mouth is open, then that means its stomach is empty. Let's just hope it's not staring at us with its mouth open. But that's fairly simple and straightforward, though it is very interesting that it will release gas from its body. That makes it feel like not only do they add more pollution to the area, but they also may be attracting Koffing for them to eat as they evolve. Also, it's probably methane now that I think about it. You know, gas emitted from its body after it eats. Yeah, that's probably what it is. It's farting. But like through its skin? Ugh. I don't think they will always actively hunt Koffing, by the way, but it would make the most sense to see Swalot just wandering around and then taking advantage of the opportunity. But let's read up on Swalot to understand it better. It can expand and contract its body at will and is capable of swallowing anything whole and can digest anything except its own stomach lining. It covers prey and opponents with a powerful poison. The whole idea of not eating your own stomach lining makes perfect sense because, you know, that's what stops our stomach from basically being ripped apart, is that the acid within our body can't digest that due to a number of reasons that I'm not going to get into here, thus protecting the rest of our body. Thank you. It likes eating poisoned and poisonous things. It lives in grasslands and savannas, and as mentioned in its sleep style decks, it sometimes sleeps with its mouth wide open. It is believed that Swalot is then dreaming of a huge meal it is attempting to swallow whole. That makes it very, very cute. Now, no other prey is really noted, but considering it can digest anything, I'm sure that it will just eat anything it has poisoned and comes across. This means that they're just eating whatever comes their way, as long as they're just filled to the brim with poison, and that solves actually another ecological niche. If there's pollution and toxins, they're just gonna absorb it, they're gonna eat it, they're gonna get rid of it. And that doesn't matter, it doesn't matter who or what it is. It's you, your brother, your grandmother, that one random kid that hit you with a soccer ball while you were hungover and walking to the store to get a cornetto, everyone and everything. And where do we find the first Gulpin? Of course, it's on Route 110, which is just below the cycling road in Hoenn. It claims that nature is untouched because it's above the ground, but unfortunately, that's clearly not the case, as enough trash is being dropped here to allow Gulpin to rear its head and exist in this area. While I normally try not to include very special Pokemon, within Oris we find Trubbish appearing as a hidden Pokemon only after capturing Groudon and Kyogre. This then just helps solidify this relationship that the cycling road of Hoenn has with the route below and the garbage litter that is being produced by those cycling past. And we might as well talk about Trubbish now, since they will be another one of our leads later on. This Pokemon was created when a mixture of domestic and industrial waste underwent a chemical reaction of some sort. Trubbish emits noxious burp-like gases, which, when inhaled, will render the victim bedridden for a week. This gas can also prove fatal when inhaled by young Pokemon and children. Again, all decomposing fumes can cause harm to the body, so it makes sense that it would be fatal to younger or sick individuals. Its ear-like tufts stand straight up when startled, are lifted if happy, and lowered if it is feeling down, which is partially why it is weirdly considered a cat-like Pokemon. Now, once it does befriend a person, it will cease expelling foul odors. It prefers unsanitary places, such as garbage dumps, where it finds trash and other rotten stuff, such as moldy apples for food. Alolan Grimer is a common enemy of Trubbish, and Alolan Muck preys on it. Galarian Weezing feed on the fumes that they do produce. So while it might stop expelling foul odors, it seems as though Trubbish will evolve no matter what once it has eaten enough trash. After all, Garbodor is just a pile of garbage that burst open. No shade, just facts. And we'll circle back to Trubbish later, and instead we can follow Gulpin into some other areas. They are found in the Great Marsh, but that's likely just because they are the resident detrivore of the area. But of course, the next prominent area in which they are found is on Route 5 of Kalos. And can you guess what Route 5 is? No, it's not the cycling road, since that doesn't exist. Instead, it's the Versant Road, where roller skaters across Kalos gather together. So once again, more litter being left behind. There's not a lot of Gulpin here, but there's enough litter that Gulpin gathers here too, of course. The most notable place is actually within Pokemon Snap itself, as in the Lentil region, there is a very special section within the Badlands in which we find what I can only describe as a shallow pool of toxic liquid. Jutting up from this liquid are crystallized stalagmites jutting from the pool itself, likely created due to the arid heat drying it all out and causing the pools to lower over time. But not only do the Swalot reside here, but also the Koffing, and this is in fact where we would see the fated horror of Swalot consuming this little floating ball of poison. I'm gonna have to dig into that a lot more when I cover the complete ecology of the Lentil region, which I'm hoping to really be able to do in the next 2 to 3 videos. Otherwise, once again, the remaining areas seem to place Gulpin as more of a hunter slash detrivore than anything else. So how about we talk about where the Trubbish are next? Chemical and industrial waste mixed with garbage bags is what makes up these Pokemon, just as a quick reminder. They even prefer to live in unsanitary places, so this should be incredibly straightforward. They appear on both Route 5 and 16, Route 5 being a busy road where performers gather and the main bridge leading to the next city, meaning it was going to be a high traffic area to begin with and have the potential of having garbage being collected. Now, Route 16 connects to Nimbasa and the Marvelous Bridge, so once again, very high traffic area. We even, interestingly enough, find Minccino on these routes, as it is a Pokemon that likes to tidy things up and make sure everything sparkles with how clean it is. And oh boy, are there a lot of things that need cleaning and tidying up around these parts. Then in Black 2, White 2, they actually start appearing on Route 4 once all the buildings have finally been established. This is actually another great example of environmental storytelling, as originally there was a sandstorm in the area that had delayed the construction of the area, the roads, the buildings, and everything, and there were no Trubbish to be seen in the original Black and White games. But of course, now that human settlements have been established in the area, trash is left out, it all builds up, and comes to life in the form of Trubbish. Imagine the horrid smell that they have to deal with that desert heat. But it's kind of gross to think that, like, it's the invasion of humans through environmental land, and it just happened that easily, and happened so much that it then produced Trubbish. The last traditional route we see not Trubbish but Garbodor is within Route 9, which is directly noted to be a paved road that attracts those who love bikes. And by bikes, we mean motorcyclists. In fact, all 6 trainers on this route are bikers and roughneck trainer archetypes, which explains why we get so much pollution here, and in fact it only worsens in the future when in Black 2, White 2, we not only have Garbodor, but we also have Muck running around these parts. All of this also checks out considering the Unova department store is here, and I'll explain Garbodor better in the next area. Because I want to give some special attention to our next 2 areas, as in Alola we have Melee City, on the outer cape of which we find Alolan Grimer and Trubbish. Now of course Grimer was brought to Alola in order to help with their pollution here, and in Alola they often say, at least within the anime, that nature is power and how being one with nature is what brings everyone together while granting strength to its people. So of course, at least within our timeline, they decided to clean it up. I'll explain the whole alternate timeline thing later. I have some real special cases of pollution in the Pokemon world to talk about other than the majority of Galar after all. So these Grimer are brought in, they eat their fill, and they transform, now being a heck of a lot safer. The only problem we really run into is that they will, as Grimer, release crystals that contain their toxic chemicals, and those chemicals will break down. As such, we get stuck between getting rid of the Trubbish and getting rid of the toxic crystals. We have a choice to make, and I know which one is easier to handle on our end, so let the Grimer hunt them down. Unfortunately, this all comes to a head as once Trubbish do evolve into Garbodor, they were pressured and eventually fight back, allowing the survivors to become stronger than even the Garbodor of any other region that we currently know. Garbodor itself is able to spray poisonous gas and filth from its fingertips, but only from its right hand. The toxic liquid from its right arm is so virulent, it can kill a weakened foe instantly. If that filth is blocked, its arm can swell up, causing it considerable pain and discomfort. It can also finish off opponents by belting them with its left arm and spewing an awful smelling toxic gas from its mouth. Garbodor prefers to live in unsanitary places such as garbage dumps, where it devours garbage in order to grow larger. Consuming garbage also allows it to create poisons in its body, the type of which depends on the kind of garbage eaten, and there used to be a great number of them in Alola until Grimer and Muck were brought in. So now we have this back and forth fighting, this pressure that the Pokemon are putting on each other, and that in turn causes their evolutions in order for them to survive better. And since Grimer is really loving to eat the living trash bag, it now needs to evolve into Alolan Muck in order to actually defeat and consume Garbodor. Alolan Muck is unexpectedly quiet and friendly. However, if it is not fed trash for a while, its hunger will compel it to destroy its trainer's furnishings for food. Brother, the couch is not on your dinner plate. Do not swallow that, please. It is thought that it cannot maintain its energy without a constant source of toxins, which causes its voracious appetite. The crystals covering its body have a tendency to break off, which makes it extremely difficult to deal with due to the concentrated toxins contained within them. Unlike Cantonian Muck, Alolan Muck does not produce a foul stench due to its toxins being contained within its body. So when I again think of all of that, I think that these crystals don't necessarily break down, but you do have to figure out what to do with them, where to store them permanently, or how to break them down safely, how to neutralize them. But it's still so much safer than what we have seen with so many other Pokemon, or what is being done even without Pokemon. Though as we move on to Alolan Raticate, it is present, and I do want to at least mention it, but they aren't as disease-ridden or potentially bringing about as much disease or filth based on their habits, I assume. Their being that they don't eat rotting food, only seeking out the freshest of ingredients, and even further than that, they are primarily basing their diet upon fatty or high sugar fruits, which is how we get the Alolan Raticate's chubbiness in the first place. Though I am positive that we would have plenty of Raticate fecal matter to still deal with, so it's a toss-up on how filthy they really are. As a final note, we do once again find Minccino on this route likely acting as it has in previous areas as a cleanup crew. In fact, this is the best location for it to do so, as both Alolan Grimer and Minccino can work together against the Trubbish. The Lost Hotel. This once famous hotel clings to the shade of its former glory after tragedy left it in ruins. Now, in the anime, the tragedy of this hotel is explained further to have been originally owned by a man by the name of Weston. He owned this hotel originally before another man by the name of Mantle had challenged him over ownership of the hotel in a Pokemon battle. His Rotom, having ran away in fear, had cost him the battle, and the hotel was handed over to Mantle, who only proceeded to let it become a rundown building, especially within the games. Though, within the anime, there is a weird happy ending in which Ash and the gang do meet the Rotom, and they're like, oh, we can't fix this, if only we had a time machine. They walk into an elevator, Rotom takes over the elevator, and they all get whisked away to the past because this Rotom somehow managed to have time manipulation powers, and it's I don't know how to talk about that really, even though I've talked about it already. Basically, they go in the past, they give Rotom the courage to actually fight, and they actually allow it to inhabit the the technology, the washer and the mower and everything, so that way it can actually fight back against the dirty fighting foe. And then history is changed. They go back in the elevator, go to the present day, and the hotel is flourishing happily. But to kind of get back to the games, what's interesting is that we do find within the game Rotom here alongside Trubbish and Garbodor within the trash cans. Rotom has clearly taken advantage of any technology left behind, especially as you can find it naturally in any of its other forms as a 5% chance as opposed to the standard form at 75%, though Rotom can only be found in the trash cans on Tuesdays. Otherwise, Trubbish and Garbodor are found here any other days of the week. The remaining Pokemon that are here seem to mostly take advantage of the electricity still present in the area, as we find Magneton and Electrode, but it does go even further with the last three Pokemon we find. Pawniard, which just represents the thugs that are found here, Litwick, who takes advantage of those that are investigating, lurking through these halls, and because it's such a large place, these people are getting lost, and Litwick can pretend to guide them to safety while taking their souls. And Klefki, who is strangely a poster child for abandoned human buildings these days. The reason I say this is because originally, Klefki was a resident within caves as it consumed metallic ions. But after excessive mining caused by humans, which then resulted in Klefki's food source being depleted, it wandered out and found its new food source within Keys. Klefki could have tried to consume metal ions from any other source, but for some reason, it decided that keys were the easiest, least intrusive, highest common source that would then require the least amount of effort in order to acquire. It wouldn't have to then compete with Aeron lines or any other Pokemon that consumes metal in its entirety, as it doesn't even have to run into them. And we see them here in the 50 Mega Marts, and then they are found wandering through a number of other areas in other regions or within towns. And we as humanity just kind of adopted them. We're like, oh yeah, you like keys, hold on to these important keys. And I don't know if the keys eventually do fully break down after metal ions are taken away. You'd imagine they would, like they'd rust internally or something along those lines, but it's hard to say for sure. All I know is that Klefki is out and about, having been displaced due to us taking away his food source, which, yeah, that's another great example of us kind of harming the Pokemon's world. We have two massive entries here to close us out, with one of them being Galar itself. 20,000 years prior to the events of Pokemon Sword and Shield, a meteorite containing Eternatus fell in Galar. 3,000 years prior, Eternatus awakened for the first time and started an event known as the Darkest Day, causing a black storm to spread across Galar, but Eternatus was stopped by 2 humans and the legendary heroes, resulting in the boys being crowned as the kings of the region. Now, between the Darkest Day itself and the meteorite crashing, it's very similar to what we see in extreme events, such as what made the dinosaurs go extinct. Because it's important to remember that with the final extinction of dinosaurs that it wasn't instant. Instead, it started out with a meteor that kicked off a slew of events. And this is all relevant, you have to trust me on this. Long story short, for comparison, a meteor crashes down specifically within the Yucatan Peninsula in real life within Mexico, now named the Chicxulub crater. I keep messing that up. This meteor is, or will, also be the one that kickstarts the extinction of many of our ancient Pokemon that are not able to adapt fast enough to the coming changes. For when this meteor strikes, it causes a massive impact, earthquakes in the area, volcanoes erupt, which sends out lava that is very deadly. We get the volcanic traps in Siberia to boot, which coughed up extra smog and ash into the sky, which is important as we equate it to the Darkest Day, which did blot out the skies in darkness, especially when we do consider the crash site of Eternatus to be equivalent to that of a massive meteor, because it was a meteor. The sky is blotted out thanks to a ridiculous amount of pyroclastic material paired with deadly gas, meaning if you could withstand the gas, you now had to withstand a changing environment, as everything was dark and cold for a very, very long time. Even those in the water weren't safe, as superheated geysers may have even been erupting at their time. This was not a one-and-done instant extinction, this was over a great amount of time. Now, when I look at Galar, sure, there's air pollution, but not as much anymore. It used to be a lot in the past with what was likely their industrialization movement. And, very similar to the real world, that industrialization movement and a lot of what people used back then in extreme and excessive amounts still affects them to the modern day. All of this would eventually cause what is the canonical climate shift that does occur within Galar, and is what caused the majority of the regional variants that we do see there. And it's not like they can just instantly revert it or change it back. It's, oh, we learned about it, oh no, we need to slowly stop, or we need to stop altogether, and then find alternative methods. And that's what they're doing. You can kind of see that within Galar itself. But to describe what's happening to the region during these moments of great industrial just destruction essentially to the environment, plants within the water no longer receive light, and in turn they die, and phosphorus levels increase in the area more and more until cyanobacteria begin to grow in larger numbers. This could just simply occur due to general pollution, does not always have to be immediate light or lack of light. This results in less and less oxygen in the area, and those cyanobacteria will help make the water toxic until what is left is only what can be described as the death column, or more aptly, the death zone, or dead zone, once it is formed. If we put these into the right areas, this is how the stagnant pools full of bacteria come into existence, and so does the necessity of Toxel and Toxtricity, who are directly noted to drink from stagnant pools of water and absorb any toxins it might contain to create electricity. To kind of break that down a little bit further, or to help explain it in a much shorter sense, basically, pollution creates phosphorus in the water. That phosphorus is eaten up by the cyanobacteria. The cyanobacteria is eaten up by Toxel and Toxapex. And as a side, all of this talk on water, cyanobacteria, and phosphorus is something that I studied firsthand in the field, in the labs, thoroughly, both, when I was in college. And while I can't talk about it, I'm gonna say it, because I'm incredibly proud of it. My team that I had worked with had been invited to a national conference to speak on our findings, and it was genuinely beautiful meeting many other people who were also invited there. This is something I genuinely love to speak on, and it has allowed me to perfectly understand, as you can see here, how toxicity functions here from first-hand work in real life, and how toxicity actually helps Galar once it has actually evolved and become the creature that it is. But breaking away from toxicity, I can speak about another past water dweller, Galarian Corsola, who now lives on land where ancient coral used to thrive. Now, after all the water has dried up due to hotter summers, wetter winters, displacement of water, and the overall strong transition of the climate as the waters continue to heat up due to a number of different factors, coral within the Pokemon world bleached, much like they do in the real world, effectively killing them. And unfortunately for Corsola, they are coral themselves. And yes, regular coral does exist in the Pokemon world, at least within the Snap games. And Corsola is now unable to live in these new conditions. They eventually bleach and then they pass away. Though what's interesting about this is that coral itself is built up by coral polyps who actually live within the coral. Some are able to move around the ocean, moving about it until they find the one home they truly want. I'm not sure if there's truly any coral polyps in Corsola, but what we do know is that this little depressed guy managed to find life in a new ghostly form. Given enough time and enough people making physical contact with it, this Corsola exacts its indirect, unintentional revenge and will absorb enough life energy to eventually break free of its shell and become Corsola. This Pokemon now being so dangerous that even just by touching it, you will be turned to stone. Real shame, since it's one of my favorite regional variants, and they like to kind of grow or look up at the full moon when it's available. And just as a reminder, it's this mix of what has happened in the past and then how much humanity has added to it through their extreme industrial waste habits or anything else that has caused the acceleration of climate change through their pollution. It's still a climate shift which caused an imbalance in the ecosystem, making it very unhealthy overall. And these things kind of just happen, right? Climate change and global warming are things that kind of happen, but they happen over an excessive amount of time within a set cycle of like hundreds of thousands of years. The problem is when it's accelerated and nothing can adapt fast enough to then be able to survive. And that's just putting it really, really lightly without getting into the nitty-gritty details. And at least Galar nowadays is trying to use a slew of green renewable energy in the right way, as they depend on a number of different sources until Rose decides to try and awaken Eternatus, try to turn it into Eternamax, and completely rely on one source of energy, which is never the answer. So, you know, there's that. And even though they're trying to make it better, you might be asking, well, why hasn't Galar improved then? Well, it's because there are a lot of cases where it's just not going to improve immediately. It just doesn't. It takes years and years, decades, maybe even centuries for it to improve. And with some things like those dead zones that I mentioned, it might take thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars to even try to fix, and it might even not work. But we need to try anyway. Now, moving away from that and, you know, hopefully not making you depressed, we do have one very special case that I love speaking about, and that is the case of Galarian Weezing. This because it seems to have evolved to instead intake the toxic air of the environment and turn it into something new, to purify it, as it consumes particles from polluted air and expels clean air instead of droppings. The toxins within Galarian Weezing's body are accumulated into poison gas clouds that leak and drift around it. The gas is its best weapon in battle, being potent enough to stun and immobilize an opponent with just a whiff. It preys on Trubbish for the fumes that they produce. What I wonder is if the gas that it leaks out is not necessarily a toxic gas in the sense of, let's say, smog, but rather in the sense of it being ozone, which once again is super important, but is still ridiculously toxic to us. Maybe it's just releasing pure oxygen, and even then, pure oxygen can be toxic to us. The air we breathe is a mixture of a number of different gases. Either way, it seems as though Weezing acts as a sort of weird osmosis. Normally, the air is so clean outside that Weezing can release toxic smog into the air or whatever other toxic gas it's releasing. But in the Galar region, what if there's so much pollution that it can't actually release more? So that's why it is forced to instead release clean air to balance things out better. It may feel like a little bit of a stretch at times, but it could simply be the natural adaptation that is needed. At the very least, it seems that it's just similar to Muck, that it got all the food it needed and reacted to the surplus, becoming a new regional form. And now that I think about it more, that actually all goes back to the idea of these are Pokemon that are answers to the toxic waste or the pollution that is added to the environment. If they are supposed to be this combination, these creatures that are the full conglomerate, these poisonous gases, these poisonous sludges, and you name it, and they are technically getting rid of it, breaking it down, turning it into something new that can be broken down once more and turned into something new again until it's gone. What if, with there being less and less pollution, their bodies are changing so that way they need less and less of it, or their bodies are adapting so that way they can break down what is remaining, so that way they can keep surviving in these new environments, these new habitats, and continue being the answers to humanity's pollution until all of the pollution is gone. Meaning that, in the Pokemon world, when all of humanity passes away, eventually Pokemon like Weezing and Pokemon like Muk will eventually take over every little thing and break it all down until there is nothing toxic or pollutive left in the world, truly making it so that nature takes everything back and heals, going back to what it was before humanity set their nasty little feet upon the world itself. But I digress. I won't speak on Obstagoon, but it is important to note that many Pokemon such as it only exist to be so brutal because of what is noted to be the incredibly harsh environment that exists within the Galar region. Instead though, we'll move on to Galarian Stunfisk, the bear trap with a Pokeball in the center of it. A high iron content in the areas in which it lives has caused this new form of our little mudfish, but what's most interesting to me is that the Pokeball that it has within the center of its trap is an adaptation. Attribute it as you will, but I would like to say that this Pokemon exists to cull humanity. Think of it this way. Nature, as I stated, will always take back the Earth in one way or another. When we outstay our welcome, the Earth adapts in beautiful ways. This is ranged from mushrooms that absorb nuclear particles to bacteria that can eat plastic or styrofoam. So given Pokemon enough time, and they will adapt to mimic the thing we keep our eyes out for the most, Pokeballs. Now, this isn't to say that they have adapted solely to snap their little bear trap bodies onto our arms or legs. They have just adapted to what lets them eat more. They have adapted to expand their potential diet, now including not just other Pokemon, but us as well. They have become desperate for any food that they can get in such a harsh environment, and so they adapt so they can eat everything that steps on them. Because originally the Stunfisk we were originally aware of cannot just completely shock anything that stands on it. If it's heavy enough or large enough, the shock that they produce will not paralyze them, and as such Stunfisk has to run away because it just attacks something that'll probably kill it. The last Pokemon within Galar that I think is very worthwhile to speak about is Galarian Darumaka and Darmanitan. Because it states directly it lived in snowy areas for so long that its fire sac cooled off and atrophied. It now has an organ that generates cold instead. The colder they get, the more energetic they are. They freeze their breath to make snowballs, using them as ammo for playful snowball fights. To explain that better, the organ it did have still exists within its body. Another example of an atrophied portion of a body, or a Pokemon, is actually Cherubi's second head, though that head is now entirely vestigial. For Darumaka here, this is incredibly important as their bodies quickly adapted in order to better survive within the climate shift of Galar, but now they have both fire and cold organs within them. This doesn't become an issue unless it has the ability to enter its Zen mode as a Galarian Darmanitan, because that is when it becomes the only current fire-ice type in all of Pokemon. Zen mode Galarian Darmanitan goes on an uncontrollable rampage, spewing flames everywhere, which is not just dangerous for others, but also itself, as it will begin to melt away unless its outrage is quelled. Otherwise, Galarian Darmanitan itself is known to be a very gentle creature. Galar as a whole is genuinely making the best of a bad situation and is trying to improve. Its environmental storytelling through its Pokemon was actually far more amazing than I or most other people give it credit for. But the important thing to remember is that while I would attribute the Darkest Day and human pollution together to have helped with all this climate shift and the rapid way that it happened, the same damaging effect could be achieved by just humanity alone. And it has happened in real life all over, all because of what we have done in the past. But I don't have time to dig deep into all of that here. I'll just have to save that for a second channel coming in the distant future, a channel dedicated entirely to science. Our final entry for today is simply the Hau'oli city from the alternate dimension in which we encounter Guzzlord. It has been confirmed many times at this point that this is Hau'oli, but what happened here? Well, thanks to flyers within the city and conversations with the only current resident of the city, we find that a great event had occurred in the past, one that had made this version of the city and island a wasteland. For you see, while Guzzlord is here causing great destruction, Guzzlord is not the one who caused all the damage. It was humanity, or at least the pollution. It is suspected that the people of Alola within this timeline allowed for a power plant of some kind to be built, and they hold resentment for it but don't quite remember why, or at least the people or only person we really talk to states that. We don't know for sure how everything became incredibly polluted, but it could have been done through a number of different ways. What I suspect is that it was done through just general mass amounts of waste production, considering Alola has already been described as a region that used to have an immense pollution problem that mimics the battles that real-life Hawaii would have faced. Trash, oil spills, wastewater pollution, whatever tourists did, the whole works. Now, Alola residents, especially within the anime, once again make a big deal about nature, how we are connected to it, we benefit from it, we need to give back to it and be one with it. This is because they say nature provides, and that nature is what gives power to people and Pokemon. That nature is our protector, and they are 100% correct. And I don't say that just because I'm a tree hugger, I say it because their great deities, the spirit guardians known as the Tapus, do in fact derive their energy from nature itself. One of their special moves even being named Nature's Wrath. But within this alternate timeline, the land has become polluted, nature has fallen apart, and this in turn took away the powers of the Tapus. Eventually, Tapu Koko would no longer have the powers of nature. Necrozma's light would no longer shine down upon Alola, especially as it wouldn't have been able to absorb Solgaleo and Lunala, as they would not have their Cosmog here to be nurtured. The Cosmog would have never eventually become Solgaleo Lunala, and nothing would have been restored. At least within the anime, there's like 50 different canons going on, right? But ultimately, from there, Z-moves would no longer be possible. At the peak of this problem, Guzzlord would appear. But what's most interesting about Guzzlord is that it is a Pokemon that is shown to be spoken of endearingly within this alternate timeline. Because despite everything, despite the fact that Guzzlord can eat mountains and the rivers themselves, the fact that Tapu Koko can't defeat it anymore because nature is gone and Z-moves no longer exist, Guzzlord is endearingly referred to. Why? Because as many people before me have stated, Guzzlord is related to Zygarde, because not only has the designer of Guzzlord teased us on the fact that the two of them look so familiar without giving us any actual information, but they seem to hold a great role within the environment, just in a twisted way. Editing Acrylic here without the lab coat. I feel like this is becoming more common because I do extra research while editing the video to make sure I didn't miss anything small, which is like my third part of the draft. But the reason why I'm here right now is because I was trying to find the specific tweet by the creator, or rather designer, of Guzzlord, and in doing so, I happened upon CentroLeak's stuff, and CentroLeak's stuff had, you know, they've leaked a lot of stuff in the past, and I'm not going to give any spoilers for any of the new games that are coming out or anything along those lines. I hate doing that. I despise it, because I want to enjoy the games, right? But I will sometimes look at old information in order to better understand what's going on now. One of these pieces of information is the scrapped Pokemon Z details that were released sometime in 2024, looks like November 3rd, 2024, and when that came out, or these big leaks came out, it turns out that Zygarde was originally supposed to have two complete forms, Form X and Form Y. X was supposed to be a large wolf that hunts Xerneas as prey, while Y was going to be an anti-aircraft weaponry to hunt Yveltal. Both are pretty freaking dope, and it makes a lot of sense at least to see the wolf, considering its 10% form that we later see within Alola, but that aircraft is gone. We don't have an aircraft, we have a snake, we have 100% form, and then we have the cells and cores, of course. Which apparently those were repurposed to the 10% and 100% Zygarde form, so we will likely never get the anti-aircraft 100% form. And then we would have had box art of it. There would have been a Zygarde-like rock found in Sinnoh and Dexiel's research lab called the Z-Stone, and there were 2 cut plots for Zygarde, one for Pokemon Z and the other one for Sun and Moon, which completely explains why we would have originally found Guzzlord within End Cave, or otherwise known as Resolution Cave. Pokemon Z, which is known as Zygarde, monitors both Pokemon X and Y, Xerneas and Yveltal, who control the life energy of the Kalos region. Still true. It appears when the balance between X and Y is disrupted, creating distortion in the world, and fights either Xerneas or Yveltal to restore balance. Still very, very true, considering that Zygarde can flat out not even nullify, but reverse the effects of their significant abilities. And since it is a swarm, the way its individuals connect causes its body shape to change significantly. It changes into forms advantageous for battling each Xerneas or Yveltal. All 100% true still. Then we get into Pokemon Sun and Moon. We get communication from Dexiel that says a message has come in and there is a beast in the End Cave. Zygarde has arrived, having judged that the beast is a threat to the ecosystem, and we were told to go to End Cave, Resolution Cave, with Zygarde complete form to handle this situation. And what do we find? Like I said, at Resolution Cave, we find Guzzlord. The beast is discovered there, and Zygarde once again comes to defeat the beast. Zygarde is so eager to fight that the Pokeball containing Zygarde itself is shaking, which is pretty dope, I gotta admit. You send out Zygarde, you defeat Guzzlord, and then you are done with the situation. Now being able to have Zygarde with its 2 forms and everything within Alola as your own personal Pokemon. So, as much as I love the Zygarde Guzzlord being the same Pokemon theory, this would probably explain why the original creator of it could not speak, or at least, again, original designer of it, could not speak about their relation to each other. Does this mean that Zygarde and Guzzlord aren't potentially still related in some capacity, biologically, being a corrupted form or anything like that? No, but I'll let past me finish talking about all that. I just really wanted to give you this information because while it isn't true or canon anymore, it might give us an idea as to what might happen in Pokemon's future, or at least let us understand better the things that were scrapped, the things that we do see, and why they are there. Which is the whole purpose of what I do, is to try and find these bits of information, really parse it out, really do the research and analyze it so I can bring it to you, and you don't have to go crazy having to go through 5, 6, 7 different pages of information just for the tiniest little crumb of information like I do sometimes. I love what I do. Don't take that as a negative, please. Their appearances match, from their eyes to their additional snake-like arms, their bodies sharing a similar jagged face, and 2 of them even sharing a location within Alola. And if you want to know even more, I highly recommend checking into my Iceberg series, because I made that months ago, and you know, it's a bunch of small theories. But how could this have happened? Well, if the entire land itself is polluted, from the water to the ground to even the air, then how could Zygarde combat it? Because the idea here is that Zygarde is supposed to come together to eliminate any threats to the environment itself once it's in its 100% form. But how does one combat the particles that invade every single fragment of the island itself? Well, you eat it. You remove it. You excise the cancer from the body completely, because we only know that the island itself is completely ruined, not any other region, not the entire planet. So as such, you just erase the entire island before it can infect the rest of the world, before the pollution and the grime can sink its tendrils into the rest of the world that Zygarde needs to protect. And this would even explain why Guzzlord is stated to not defecate or urinate at all directly. It is stated that it does not create any form of waste, all because that would just reintroduce all of the harmful materials back into the environment if it did. Because something that I've realized right now is that Guzzlord is stated directly to eat the rivers and the mountains, things that are on the island or on the lowland islands in general. But what is not stated to eat is the oceans itself. Not even in its concept art is it noted to eat the oceans, meaning that it's not trying to destroy absolutely everything. It's trying to get rid of what is there. It's trying to get rid of the problem. It is not a planet destroyer. So in the end, these two Pokemon who share their ancient typing of the dragon, both of them serve to help their planet in some way, both acting to destroy that which serves as a risk to the balance of the ecosystem as we know it. The only question from there is, how did Zygarde become Guzzlord specifically? It could be a number of different ways. Some people say it's a corrupted Zygarde. I might even add in the idea that it might be related to Zygarde, but is not Zygarde. Either way, it's something that we may never truly find out. So there are, of course, while we close out here, plenty of other Pokemon that we could have considered today. Like Badoo is one that I know that the cleaner the water that it absorbs into its body, the more poisonous its spores typically end up being. Or you find other Pokemon that might be generally created or are theorized to be created by humanity. Those artificial Pokemon, which I'm not really including here, or even our invasive species, which I've done a whole video on of themselves, and the Ultra Beasts are included in the invasive species area of all of this, or at least as I consider them. And not every poison type Pokemon is necessarily one that is actually derived from pollution itself or harmful to the environment. Pokemon as a whole, as stated by Professor Juniper, are essentially supposed to be creatures that will adapt to any environment and will persist throughout all of time, bringing a lot of questions forward as to what are their limits. Some people may even say that the Paradox Pokemon of the future aren't built by humans, but rather exist as a robotic form or similar to robotic forms in order to survive in whatever future that humanity has made. But I'll have to do Paradox Pokemon in their own video, and we'll might be talking about Pokemon breeding in a video very, very soon before we get into the lentil ecology. But if you made it this far, as always, I gotta say, thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this and did make it this far, please make sure you do subscribe. And you know what? Let me know about any really nice, uplifting projects that have existed. You know, anything related to where people have done something good and cleaned up the world around them, or bring some attention to me that I don't know about, something I didn't discuss regarding Pokemon that you think might benefit my argument or go against me with some good facts, because I love reading those, and also comments and watch time are both a great way to help boost a video's reach as stated by YouTube itself. And if you enjoyed this so much that you'd like to go the extra mile, become a member of the channel for as little as $3 a month. On YouTube, if you become a member, you get videos early. Otherwise, there are a number of different perks that you do get between YouTube or Patreon, in addition to hearing your name shouted out at the end of every single video. And with that, we're gonna go shout out all the members of the channel. Thank you to all of our members of the channel, starting with the Gods of Hope, Crowfighter 14, Biggins, Vatty, Knit, Buzzin, Summer, then the champions, Andrew Mercedes Costa and Joshua Biggins Wilson. Then all of the Knights of the Court, Double, Shiny Gems, Sarah Brisboys, Vatty Lemon, Fix My Nitrogen, Krillfighter 14, Plow, Annie Stone, Alan, Heals for Life, Blue Dalek, and Warren Hemphill. And then finally, all of the Wanderers of the channel. Vanny Samaru, Max Supreme Surfer, Singe, Zanzibar, Exporter Chi, She, Floriana, 16, Midnight Azalea, Pyro Master, J. Gill, Reckless, Simpson, Nate, Prime 90s, Nebula Games, Jenna M, None of Your Business, Ezra, Rowan for 80, Brock Baker, Zippin, Pigeon 80, Abby Higgs, Adrian CS, Amandic Masticola 3, Ronan, Space Lawsy, Sadler Rankin, Abdallah Aladi, Tamarkle, Gaming Ruins, Big Brick, Mace Breaker, Rainbow, Hungry, Goat, Malachi, Zalmakai, Zaffron, Queen, Clark, GA, Zumir, Gaia, Joe Knows Not That Important, Melly vs. the World, Xanthar, the Anime King, Daniel Troop, E. Rick Rift, Michael Gibbs, Brian Millie, Jers, Mr. Diagonal Gibbs, Night Owl 707, Evil Chan, Ruby, Softy Kai, Michael 626, Gaming, Nicole Manassian, Kristen, Sandwich Boss, Emmy, whatever this is, Dance Sporty Emperor, Michael Stein, Alolan Figment, Wasp Wisteria, Medico TH73, Spurgalicious, Sydney House, Miss Zora, Dakota Couch, Brad Sundimer, Drixel, Carl Jean, Hunter, Au, Hussein Kassan, Rebecca Connell, Hugh, Jappy W, Memento Mortem, Korn, Marshy, Edward, Kasowski, Federica Fox, Ernst Greenberg, Hag, Adicadabra, King Pie, Jack of Frost, Righteous Ivy, Addic C, Jacob Square, DJ Monk 23, Squidwater, Rice Smith, Gamer, Badge, Recognize, Just JM, Star S, MD, Horse with a Cocktail, Amuse, Art World, Tolumiel, Gwendolyn, Eastgander072, Andrew, Foss, Speak Anonymous, Sunman, Sloth, Knock, New Ian, Ray, Big and C9, Corner of the Cobb, Michael Vale, Unseelie, King, Devorian Skies, Daniel Tracy, Garrett Hoffman, Rosso, Dylan Peters, Malachi Burkhardt, Scott, and Heather Wyson. Thank you all for being members of the channel. It goes an extra mile and helps the channel immensely. So with that, as always, thank you so much for watching. Don't do anything I wouldn't do. Don't do anything I wouldn't do. Please be nice to each other. I love you, and I'll see you next time.